So day 9 of the trial of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin was all about the expert medical testimony. It was complicated, it was fascinating, but it answered a lot of questions about how George Floyd died. And you're going to learn all about it in today's episode. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we're going to look at the 3 witnesses that took the stand on the 9th day of the trial against Derek Chauvin. We heard from a world-renowned doctor that gave us a formal cause of death for Floyd. We heard from a forensic expert who did the toxicology report. So now we know exactly what was in Floyd's bloodstream, in his system at the time of his death. And we also got an opinion from a medical expert as to whether those levels of drugs in the system could have caused an overdose. We're going to look at each one of those things in today's episode. As always, I'd have you like, comment, subscribe, and share. And remember that Lawyer Up is now available on all major podcast outlets. So they started off by calling a Dr. Martin Tobin. He is a world-renowned pulmonologist. He is a physician at Loyola University Medical Center, and he is the author of a 1,500-page textbook entitled Principles and Practice of Mechanical Ventilation, which is referred to as the Bible on treating breathing disorders. So this guy was fascinating. He looked and sounded like somebody out of Hogwarts, something from Harry Potter, but he was really interesting. So Dr. Tobin is an expert medical witness for the prosecution, but he didn't get paid for testifying. Most of the other expert witnesses for the state are getting paid to be there. However, Dr. Tobin didn't take a penny for his services. And most of his testimony was based upon his observations of the arrest videos, his observations of Floyd's respiration or his breathing. It's very interesting. So Dr. Tobin also came with all of his own exhibits and graphics and 3D images to illustrate exactly what happened to George Floyd. Tobin even provided a second-by-second timeline showing the precise moments that Floyd lost consciousness, stopped breathing, and then suffered a traumatic, irreversible brain injury. Dr. Tobin specifically testified that George Floyd died from lack of oxygen to his brain, resulting from Officer Chauvin's pressure on Floyd's neck as he laid pinned to the ground in handcuffs. The quote from the trial was that Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen, and this caused damage to his brain, and it also caused a pulseless electrical activity arrhythmia that caused his heart to stop. He then said, this is sometimes referred to as asphyxia, which, of course, I know what that means. The other stuff, not so much. Dr. Tobin then testified that Floyd's asphyxia was the direct result of being handcuffed, being in a prone position, and then having pressure applied to his neck and his back areas. Specifically, and this is where it got really specific, Dr. Tobin said in reviewing all of the videos that Chauvin's left knee was on the back of Floyd's neck for more than 90% of the 9 minutes and 29 seconds that the prosecutors say Floyd was restrained on the ground. Chauvin's knee jammed into Floyd's neck, the doctor said, narrowed the hypopharynx, is what they call it, in the throat, severely restricting his ability to take in air. Then Tobin went on to say that Chauvin's right knee was on Floyd's back or against the left side of his chest for at least 57% of the time, further restricting airflow. Dr. Tobin then ruled out the possibility of the fentanyl found in Floyd's system as basically being the cause of death. And he based this upon what he viewed as respiration. He said he observed in the videos that Floyd had a normal respiratory rate when the restraint began. And he said that if he was on fentanyl, or at least a significant dose of fentanyl, he would have had a visibly lowered respiratory rate. So his breathing would have been slower as Dr. Tobin observed those videos. He also rejected the possibility that Floyd died of a sudden heart attack because he said that if that were the case, he would have been able to observe a respiratory rate that would have skyrocketed, and he didn't see that either. So watching these breathing or these respiratory rates, as he called them, in the videos, Dr. Tobin then testified as to the exact time, in his opinion, that Floyd went unconscious, stopped breathing, and died. And he testified at 8:22 p.m. and 22 seconds, that's the moment the life goes out of his body. It's kind of crazy that he can draw these conclusions from just watching respiration on a video. During cross-examination, of course, the defense attorney challenged his ability to do this and to get that precise simply from watching these videos and looking at medical records. And he also talked about the county medical examiner's autopsy. And he said, hey, Dr. Tobin, there was no bruising on Floyd's neck nor any injuries to his hypopharynx, as he referred to it as. And the doctor said, well, I wouldn't expect anything to be found because the effects are not something that would remain at the time of autopsy. Wicked smart guy, and the defense has got their work cut out for him, bringing their own experts to counter this testimony. The next witness that was called was Daniel Eisenschmidt. Easy for me to say, right? We've got these difficult pronunciations in today's episode. Now, he's the forensic toxicologist that testified that he drew blood from Floyd's body the night he died. Now, this guy gave a lot of hyper-technical testimony about nanograms per millimeter of this and metabolized and unmetabolized that and blah, 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 right? But at the end of the day, he found methamphetamine, fentanyl, THC, and caffeine in Floyd's blood samples. But he described the fentanyl and methamphetamine levels found in the blood to be low trace levels, very small amounts. The state then called a Dr. Bill Smock, who is an expert in emergency medical care and forensic medicine. And he said he reviewed Floyd's medical records, which showed that Floyd had been a chronic drug user for years and had built up a tolerance for fentanyl and methamphetamine. He said then that the levels found in Floyd's system during the tox screen were not anywhere close to what would have been required for him to overdose. He also testified that he found no evidence that Floyd could have died of a sudden heart attack and no evidence that he died from the results of excited delirium. So the government put on a lot of technical evidence, but it was very persuasive and it was going to set a pretty high bar for the defendant's experts to overcome. That was the end of the testimony for day 9. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If so, smash that like button for me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do so. If you have a comment about any of the medical testimony or anything else that we've talked about today or in any of the other episodes, put it in the comment sections below. And as always, I love it when you share me on social media. My name's Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.